Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of building this end-to-end data pipeline. In the part 1 we were able to extract data from the Zillow RapidAPI, and then we loaded that on our S3 bucket. Okay, when we first of all extracted it onto our EC2, and then we use a bash operator to load to our S3 bucket. Okay, and we add our task, our workflow to be of this form, right? We add the Python operator and then we add the bash operator, and we confirmed that everything was working very well. Okay, now what we would then want to do today is we want to a situation whereby now loading that data into this bucket will trigger a lambda function which will copy and load that data, that same JSON data, into the another Amazon S3 bucket. And the reason, like I said earlier in the part 1, was that we don't want our file to, we don't want anything to tamper with our file. We want our file inside this landing zone, this raw zone. We want it to be as pristine as possible. So we want our file to be inside this before we can do the transformation. Okay, so this same file is going to be here, and then we can do transformation with this lambda function. That way we can always have a raw copy of that with nothing, so that we can be sure that nothing is affecting our file right here. And that is why we want to create a copy of that right here. Okay, now guys, let us get going and let's go and build the next phase of this project. Okay, now let us come right here to our to our AWS, and let us search for lambda. And for those of you that have not watched my previous video on creating your first lambda, I highly encourage you to go watch that video right here. Okay, as a matter of fact, let me pull it up right here to show to you guys. Okay, so this is going to be the AWS lambda function, the video that I have to create your first lambda function for beginners. I highly encourage you to go. You can also go and watch this if you want to get a good head start on creating lambda function also, right? So you can watch this also video. While you are there, don't forget to like that video. Okay, however, I will do my best to make sure that I also explain what lambda function is in this particular end-to-end project. Okay, now let us open our lambda in a new tab. Okay, now what I am going to do right now is that I'm going to create a lambda function name right here. I will give it this name. Let me do a copy and paste right here. So I'll do create function. Okay, now in this case we want to create our lambda from scratch. That's why I say author from scratch. Then I'll give it a name right here. So I'm giving it copy raw JSON file dash lambda function, and then you pick your language, choose the language to use, and I will go ahead and choose Python 3.10. Okay, and I've explained all of this also in my previous video which I just showed you, and I'll also put the link to that in the description. Okay, that this architecture, this is fine. Okay, now if you come right here, you can see something right here. It says that the execution role, we want to give permissions to our lambda right here. So it says create a new role with basic lambda function, or should we use an existing role? Okay, so in this case we can use an existing role. We can create a role for lambda and then assign that role to this lambda function we are creating. So if we click on this triangle right here, you can see we don't have any role right now. Okay, however, we can create a role. Okay, we already know we have IAM right here. I can right click, or you can search, okay, or even better still, I have a tab right here already for IAM, so you can also go ahead and, you know, open IAM, just search, go to the search bar and do that. Okay, so let us create a role for our lambda function. Okay, now what I am going to do right now is that I'm going to say create role. Okay, now when you say create role, what are you trying to do? Remember that we have already done something like that in part 1, where we created a role to give access to our EC, to give permission to our EC2 to be able to access our S3 bucket. So basically we want to do almost pretty much the same thing to this also right now. Okay, so we are going to give access to lambda. Previously in part 1 we did EC2, but this is lambda. Okay, you choose lambda and then you come to next. Okay, now when you come to next, remember we want to give access to our S3 bucket, so type S3 and say enter. So we are going to do Amazon S3 full access. You can see that, guys. Now you can see Amazon S3 says provides full access to all buckets, okay, via the AWS management console and all of that. Okay, and then we want to also give what we call AWS lambda basic execution role. Okay, can I see that right here? I don't think I see that immediately here, but you know, we can type that and say AWS lambda basic. Let me type that. Let me see what it gives me. It doesn't give me anything right here, but I can go ahead and maybe let me copy and paste the name of the role. I know the name of the role, and let us search AWS lambda basic execution role. Now I need to, you know, take this out, this S3, take this out. Sorry, I think that was probably the problem. Again, if we try to do it again, AWS lambda basic, let's try that again. Now you can see that the problem was because I still had that S3 right there. Okay, so now I say AWS lambda basic, and then if I come right here, this is the role I was talking about, AWS lambda basic execution role. What does this do? This provides write permissions to CloudWatch logs. So what that means is that if we give this permission, if we give this permission to our lambda, then that means that our lambda can write to the CloudWatch logs. So that means all the things that is happening on our lambda function, we can see that on our CloudWatch logs. Okay, we can see what's going on. So I will also check this. So now we are giving S3 and AWS basic execution role, which is to be able to write to CloudWatch logs. Okay, then I will do next. If I do next, let me then give this a name. Okay, let me give this role a name. I'll call it lambda function full S3 access dash CloudWatch. Everything is right here. You can see lambda basic execution role. Okay, and also S3 full access. Okay, I can just say create role. You can see it's creating the role. Role has been created, and you can also see it right here, lambda function full S3 access CloudWatch. Very good, guys. Now let me go back to my lambda function right here that we say use an existing role. I will just refresh. If I refresh, remember previously we did not see anything, but now if I click on this, you can see I can see this right here. So now we have given access to our lambda function to be able to access, we're giving permission to our lambda function to be able to access our S3 and also to be able to write to CloudWatch. Okay, I hope you are getting this, guys. Very good. Do we have anything right here? Okay, nothing. Let's just do create function. Okay, so now this is going to be creating the function. Now you can see it has created the function right here, guys. Okay, I hope you understand that right now. Okay, now the next thing I'll quickly like to do right here for you is that we need to add a trigger. Remember that what we said right here is that when our data, our JSON data gets into this landing zone, we want it to trigger this lambda function. Okay, so that means this bucket needs to trigger this lambda function whenever an event happens on inside this bucket. Okay, so whenever an event happens inside this bucket, and that event is whenever a file is uploaded right there. Okay, so that means that you will come to this. Remember, this is the lambda function, AWS lambda function we just created. So we'll come to add trigger. I'll come to add trigger, then I'll say select a source. Our source is going to be S3. So that means you could have different triggers of lambda function, but in this case it's S3. I'll click S3. Okay, and then it said select the S3 bucket. I will click. If I click this, it's going to give me the different S3 bucket I have, but this is the one I want. This is the one that's going to trigger the lambda function, because whenever there is an event happening, a new event happening in this bucket, it's going to trigger that lambda function. So I will select this. Okay, and then the event type, you can come right here and choose if it's a put operation, that is when file or something is being put into that bucket, or any of those, right, or anything, or even if you are talking about a permanently deleted event, or you say delete marker created, or just go through this list right here. But in the case of this, I'm calling it all object create event. All object create event. I'll leave that way. Okay, now what this prefix is going to do for you, what this one is going to do for you, is that in this case we are not going to use it, but let's assume you have in your bucket, you have different folders. Okay, and you want to specify which folder you are actually looking for that event to occur to trigger the lambda function. Then you can say, let's say in my bucket I have images folder, so I can just put images slash. Okay, that means that I'm saying that if any event happens inside this folder, which is inside this bucket. Okay, I hope you get that. Then for suffix, this one is saying that if I say .jpg, okay, I'm saying that if a file that ends with .jpg enters this bucket, then trigger this function. Okay, but in this case, trigger this lambda function, but in this case I'm not using that. So just come right here, acknowledge this. What this is saying is that if your function writes objects to an S3 bucket, ensure that you are using different S3 buckets for input and output, which is what we are going to be doing in this video. We are using different buckets. Okay, but because if you are using the same bucket, look at it, say writing to the same bucket increases the risk of creating a recursive invocation, which can result in increased lambda usage and increased cost. Okay, because what that means, that if you are using the same bucket for input and output, that means that as you create more file, as you create file inside that bucket, it triggers lambda function. It creates another file inside that same bucket. It triggers the lambda function again. Then it's going to be a continuous invocation, and at that point you're going to be having increased lambda usage. Therefore, you're going to be having increased cost. So he's saying that acknowledge that we told you this or something. Okay, now I can then say add. Okay, you can see now I've added S3 right there. Okay, very good guys. You can see this is the trigger. I've added the trigger, which is the S3. Now let us come back to code right here. Now I am going to paste in what our code right here so that you can see what is going on, guys. Okay, now one thing you also need to know is that as part of lambda function, JSON, you already have JSON, and also Boto3 is already installed. So I will take out all of this and then I will paste this. Remember, I've explained lambda function in my previous video that I just showed you right here that I've created before. So you can, if you're having any challenge, you can go through that. However, I also do a good justice to this right here also. Now, Boto3 has been installed on this lambda function by default. We can also import JSON, right? Okay, now what we can do is we can call our S3 client, Boto3.client, I call it this. Okay, now for you to have a lambda function, you need to have the module name, okay, which is this, and then of course, if you want to change this, we can change it. But when you change it, you have to change something in the configuration. But for the sake of this video, we are not going to be doing that. If I want to change this function name, this lambda underscore handler, I can change that. But I need to change something in the configuration. Okay. But like I said, we are not going to do that right now. Okay. And this is going to pass two arguments, event and context. Okay. In my previous video, which I just showed you guys right here, I took a lot of time to explain what event is and what context is. Okay, so I encourage you to go watch that. So in this video, I'm not going to be explaining context because I am not using context, but you can go watch that video to understand what context is all about. But in this case, we're going to be using events, and you might be wondering that how do I know how to get some, how do I know what I need to put right here? Okay, now one thing I want you to know is that remember that we just said that what we want to do is that when we loaded to this landing zone, it triggers this lambda function. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to access the data that we put inside these buckets. How do we access the data that we put inside this S3 bucket? Okay, a way for us to get that is this event. Okay, remember that the event that is happening on S3 bucket is that file that enters. Remember, we put a trigger right here, that file that enters. How do we access the bucket, which is going to be the source bucket or the bucket name? The object key is going to be the file name, that is the name of the file that enters into that S3 bucket, which is going to trigger this lambda function. So this S3 bucket, we want to get access to the name. We want to get the name of that bucket. We also want to get the file name. Okay, now let me show you how you can have a good idea of how to see that. If I click test, let me click test. If I click test, it's going to say I should create event name and all of that, but I'm not doing this. I just want to show you something. If I come to this template, okay, because we are not going to be doing the test right here. We are going to put everything together and then run our Airflow. Okay, but if you come to this template and we look for S3, if we come to this S3, let's say S3 puts, if you click this, see what is happening, guys. See what is happening right here, guys. You can see that inside this, what you are seeing right here, let me bring this up. Very good. What you are seeing right here is a dictionary. You can see is a dictionary right here, right? A JSON. What you are seeing right here, guys, is a JSON. Okay, what you are seeing right here is a JSON, and you can see right, you have records, and these records, the value is a list. You can see it is in a list. Okay, you can see it is in a list, and inside this list you now have different dictionaries as well, right? Basically, this is a nested JSON, deep nested JSON. And what we want to do right here, you see this is records. So because of that, if you come to what I have right here, I think what I'm going to do right now is just for us to be able to see what I am talking about right here. What we are going to do is let me open another lambda. Let me come right here and say lambda so that I can be able to toggle between what I want to show you. Okay, So if I come to lambda function, so this is the function we are looking at. Let me click this. Okay, now if you see what I'm doing right now, this is the event, right? We know this event is the argument, okay, that carries what we want to check. And then what is the next thing? Records. Oh, let me undo that. That was a mistake. Now, records. You can see right here the event that we want to work on, right? Which is the whole of this thing right here is the event. You see, event JSON. So now that means that the whole of this thing is equal to event, basically. So now if you say event, then records. That is what we are seeing right here, event, then records. Okay, now this record is a list, right? And because it is a list, as it is a list right here, you can see it is only one data, even though you have a lot of data, but it is basically one giant sort of JSON also object, JSON object that you are having in that list. That means for us to access this, it's going to be index 0. Okay, and that is why you have this index 0. So now after you access that index 0, then you see that you have different keys. You have different keys, and then you have one key right here, which is x3. So I can access that, which is going to be this s3. Okay, now inside this s3 key, you can see it has its own nested, dictionary right here. So at that point here, what do you see? You see you have buckets. And that is what you are seeing right here, buckets. Then now let us be able to access the name. You see, after bucket, if I click this, you can see inside this bucket I have a name. Okay, and that is what we are getting right here. So that's going to be the bucket name. I hope you are getting this right now, guys. Okay, now object key is going to be the file name. You are going to follow the same approach. Event records 0 s3 objects. You see, records, event records, s3. This is s3, and then we have objects. Now object, then you have key. Okay, the value of this key is going to be the file name. So take note, this is just a template. Okay, and that is what is happening right here. Okay, if you really want to play with this, you can play with it and and see what happens. I think what I'm going to do for you guys right now is I want you to see something right here, just to give you an idea of what's going on. Let me comment all these out. Okay, and let me just say print source. Let me say print source buckets, and also print object key. I'm trying to make sure you guys understand this. Okay, and then if I do this, you have to click deploy to make change. To save your changes. Okay, I'll say deploy. Okay, now it has deployed successfully. Okay, remember what we want to do is we want this lambda function to be triggered whenever we load data inside this bucket. Take note, that is what we want to do. Okay, so let me just refresh this just for you to see that nothing is inside aside from this JSON. Okay, now let me just play around with something right here for you guys. Let me just close this Excel sheet and then just drag this Excel sheet inside here, and let us see how this lambda function is going to interact, is going to respond. We are going to go to the monitor to be able to monitor it to see what happens. Okay, because we have deployed it now. Okay, so let me come back to this bucket, and let me just drag something right there. Okay, so I'm going to drag this CSV. I'm going to delete it later, but let me just upload this. If I upload this right here, you see I've uploaded this. Immediately what is going to happen is that it's going to make this lambda function to run. But based on what I have in this code, this lambda function will go to that S3 bucket. Remember that we have added a trigger. Okay, that would have triggered this right by now to run, and then it's going to grab, based on our code right here, it's going to grab the bucket name, and then it's going to grab the file name. And of course we know the bucket name, right? The bucket name where we added something right now, we know that to be this end-to-end YouTube-ym-bucket. Okay, now let's quickly come back right here to see what has happened, because we should see this, the name of the bucket and the file name printed. So let us go to monitor. So inside this monitor, I will come to view CloudWatch logs. Remember, we have given it access to write to CloudWatch. I'll click that. So when I click that, I'll come right here. The one I just ran right now is this one, this up one, right? Because this is the time. So I will click this. You can see I have a lot of logs, right? Because I've done different other things, right? But this is the recent one. I will click this. And then if you see, take a look at this now. I clicked it, it said init start runtime, start requested. You can see what is this right here? End-to-end YouTube-ym-bucket. This is the name of that S3 bucket. If you come right here, this is the name of the S3 bucket. You can see right here, guys, because what we are saying in our function is that we are saying our function should print for the name of the bucket and also the name of the file name. If you come back right here, what is the file name we are seeing right here? End-to-end YouTube-ym-credentials.csv. If you come to the S3 bucket, what is the file name that we put? End-to-end YouTube-ym-user1_credentials.csv. You can see that, guys. You can see that when we put this file right here, it triggers this function. So I wanted you to see that we were able to access the bucket name and also the file name. I hope you guys are getting this. Very good. I'm trying to take the time so that you guys can understand how this is working, so that by the time you create your project portfolio, you will be able to answer any questions that you are being asked. Okay, right now I can delete this because I don't really need it. I just wanted to show you guys something. Okay, now I will uncomment this and tell you what is going on, what we are going to be doing. So what we want to do in this code right now is, I say target bucket. This is the target bucket. Okay, then copy source. I'm saying bucket is source bucket. Then the key is this object key, which is the file name, as we can see. And I'm using S3 client.getWaiter to make sure that to basically check the bucket, the source bucket, and the file. I want to make sure that I have the file is already inside that source bucket before we attempt the copying. Okay, you can see it says sclient.getWaiter object exists. It wants to wait to make sure that object already exists, even though we know that yes, that is what is going to trigger the lambda function. But sometimes you might have a very large data file that is coming into that S3 bucket. Okay, even though you have that file, it triggers lambda function, but it has not fully everything is not fully loaded inside the S3 bucket. But we want to make sure that the file is all completed before we actually complete this process of copying this object inside this bucket, inside this target bucket, which we are going to create shortly. And then we are going to give it the same file name that it was in the source bucket. As you can see, the copy source, where are we copying it from? This source bucket and this file name inside this target bucket, and we are giving it the same file name, and then we are saying we are returning a status code 200, and we are returning this text copy completed successfully. Okay, I hope you get that right now, guys. So I'm going to deploy this. Now that this is fully deployed, let us create the target bucket. Which bucket do we want to copy that file? We want to copy from the previous S3 bucket. We want to copy it from this landing zone to this intermediate zone. So let us create a bucket, this bucket intermediate zone. We are going to give it a different name. So I'll come right here to buckets, okay, and I will say create buckets. Okay, let us give it a name, and the name we want to give it right here is the name we want to give it is this. I'm going to copy and paste it right here. Copy of raw JSON bucket. Make sure you are in the AWS region that you want. Okay, and then I think every other thing is good. I will say create buckets. Okay, now the bucket has been created. You can see we have end-to-end YouTube which YM bucket which we had before, and then we want to move our file. We want to copy our file from this to this new bucket we just created, copy of raw JSON bucket. If I click that and I refresh, you can see that there is nothing inside. Okay, very good, guys, very good, guys. I'm going to close this CloudWatch. I don't think I need it anymore for now. I can close this, okay, and then I can also close this, I believe, because we have deployed our code right there. Okay, so all we just need right now is to run the code, and we are going to run our Airflow again. So what happens is that when we run our Airflow is going to extract data from here again, load it inside this bucket. Immediately it loads it inside this bucket, it's going to trigger this lambda function, which is going to copy the file into this intermediate zone bucket which we just created. And we said that the intermediate zone bucket is copy of raw JSON bucket. Okay, so what I'm going to do inside this end-to-end YouTube YM is I'm going to delete this one right here. I don't need it. Oh, I click on download. I wanted to click delete. I'm going to delete, and then I'm going to say delete, permanently delete. So this has been successfully deleted. I only have one file. Okay, so now if I'm going to be running my Airflow again, I should be having two files right there. Okay, however, the new file that is going to come in is what is going to trigger this lambda function, and this lambda function will grab that file. It's going to copy it and then upload it inside this new S3 bucket. Take note, it's not going to move it. It will just copy and it will just copy it right here. Okay, so that we can still have it in that landing zone and also in this particular S3 bucket, which I call copy of raw JSON bucket. Okay, now let us go back to our Airflow and let us see what we can do. Okay, and I hope everything should be looking good. Let us trigger this. If I trigger, you can see a new instance. I can click this. You can see this is running right now. This is successful. This bash operator is running now. This is successful. It has entered this and that end-to-end S3 bucket. If it enters this is going to trigger the lambda function, and the lambda function will copy the data. If I do this, you can see that we have the second JSON right now. The first one was 12:56, now is 1:40 a.m. so this is the one we just executed. Because we have this right now, this is going to be copied by the lambda function, and then is going to load inside this bucket. You can see right here, guys, you can see that we have it right now. You can see 140. You can see how we are able to integrate different services right here using Airflow to orchestrate the process. Okay, I hope you guys are getting this right now. This is an interesting and exciting project. These are the kind of things we are going to be working on in the industry. Okay, now that we have gotten this, let us see what we have in our flow again. Now that we have been able to copy right here, we now also want to trigger another lambda function that will do transformation of our data set and then load the data set inside another S3 bucket. Okay, now let's get going, guys. So now let us create the second lambda function right here, guys, because now we are able to get the JSON inside our JSON file inside this S3, but we also want this to trigger another lambda function. So let us go to our lambda function. Let us trigger a new lambda function. I can just come right here and say function so that I can have access to this button right here. You can see this is the previous function, lambda function. Let's create another lambda function. Okay, we are going to do that also from scratch, and then I'm going to call this lambda function transformation convert to CSV lambda function. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible. Because of that, I am not doing a fancy or a lot of transformation right here. We want our transformation to be as simple as possible for the sake of this video. Okay, now you're going to choose your runtime again. We are going to choose Python 3.10. Okay, and then we're going to come here to our permissions. Remember that we created a role for lambda before that. Lambda will be able to use to access our S3 and also be able to put be able to write to CloudWatch logs. So I would say use an existing role. I will come right here and then I will select this. I hope you guys are getting this right here. We don't need anything right here, and because of that I will just say create function. Very good. You can see function is already created. Okay, and then I can come here and I can add my trigger. Remember that we said that when the JSON file gets into that S3 bucket, that is when we want to trigger this lambda function. So I'll come right here and I'll say the source is S3. Okay, and then I have to look for the bucket, and as we know, this is the bucket. Okay, that is our intermediate bucket. And then the event type, I call it all object create event. That's good enough. And since I don't have subfolder and I'm not specific about a suffix, maybe .jpg or .csv or .json, but that's fine. I can just leave that and then I can acknowledge this. I already explained this previously. Okay, and then I can say add. Okay, very good, guys. Now I have added a trigger. Okay, now that we have added a trigger, you can see this is our trigger right here. I can come to code. I can add the code right there. I'm going to do a copy and paste, and we're going to maybe do some slides, things right here. I'll do some explanation just for you to understand what's going on, and then we are going to deploy and then run our code. Okay, as usual, we are importing Boto3 JSON, pandas as PD. We're going to be using pandas. Okay, now we have Boto3.client, S3. We are calling S3, and then we have the lambda handler. I already explained all of that. I already told you how you get the source bucket and object key, because our event is S3. Right, and our event is an object or a file that gets into our S3 bucket. I have showed you how we access that, and I believe you understand that now. So I can take out this. I don't really need it. I don't want to waste time showing you again this time around. Okay, and then our target bucket, this is the name of our target bucket, which we are going to create shortly. As a matter of fact, let us create it right now, and then we can come back to this lambda function. Okay, because we want to create this, because by the time we do this transformation, we want to load our transform data inside that bucket. Okay, so I'll come right here and I'll say create bucket. I will give it a name. It needs to be unique. Okay, AWS region, I'm using the same one, and I think everything looks good. I will say create buckets. Okay, you can see I have the first bucket, second bucket, and this is the new bucket, which is called cleaned data zone CSV bucket, because I want my final data to be in CSV and not in JSON. Okay, so now guys, I hope you guys are getting this. Okay, now let us come back to this our lambda function. Okay, now we have created this bucket. Okay, now yes, now let me tell you something right here, guys, that we are trying to now do right here. Okay, now you can see that the file name, that you can see that this object key, okay, is going to have a file name that looks like this. If I come to this copy of raw, it's going to have a file name that looks like this. You can see response underscore data, all of this .json. Okay, now what I want to do right here is I want to get that name from the beginning to the, you see, -5 to the -5, you know, position. And what that means is that, let me show you, this n is going to be -1, this O is going to be -2, S is going to be -3, J is going to be -4, this dot right is going to be -5. So I want to have the file name from this response to this 3 right here, or whatever number that is before this period, this dot right here. And the reason I want to do that is if I can grab this file name, then I can eventually append a .csv to that. Okay, basically just, you know, have that in your head, that is what we are trying to do. We want the file name that we are going to be putting inside the cleaned S3 bucket. We want it to have the same file name as what we have in the other S3 bucket. The only difference is the CSV suffix. Okay, that's going to be different. Okay, and that is why we are getting that target file. That's why we call this the target file name. Okay, now I can print that. If I print, it's going to show in the CloudWatch. You can leave it there so it can show in your CloudWatch. Otherwise, you can also, you know, delete that if you want. You see that? Then like I said, if I like, I can just put it right there. And then this is, like I showed earlier, this is going to make sure that the file is already there and all of that. And then we are doing our get objects. Okay, the source and the file name is going to be in this response. If you really want to see how the response looks, you can break down this stage step by step and see how it looks, and run your pipeline and all of that, just like I did previously, that I commented some other parts out. Okay, but however, if you don't want to do that, this is how the code is going to look like. Let's assume that you commented this out, okay, and then you run your code or something, and then you run your pipeline, or maybe you have this file, you know, you drop a new file like this inside this S3 bucket, and then it's going to trigger this function. Remember, you need to deploy it, and then you can go into your CloudWatch and see how the response looks like. Okay, and also you can see how the response body. You can print it out, and you can be commenting this one after the other if you really want to see what is happening in each of the steps. Okay, but for the sake of this video, I will not be doing that, but I will leave this code with you. If you want to explore it, if you want to run it and then go into the CloudWatch and see the breakdown and see what's going on in each of the steps, how the response body, which is the data body itself. You print it, you do the read, the code, UTF, and then you print it again. I just wanted you guys to really see what's going on, okay? And then you can do JSON.loads data, so that you can then have it right here in JSON format, which we can then now start parsing. Okay, so now it's going to be, we are going to have a loop running for our in data results. Okay, and then for each of the result, for each of our data inside that result, take note. Okay, we are then going to be appending the dictionary, because it's going to be dictionary. Because let me show you something right here so you understand what I'm talking about. If you look at this JSON, if I click this, I come right here, then I can come to open. You can see that this result right here, inside this result you have a list. This list now have dictionaries. This is the first dictionary, which represents the first row or first record. This is the second one, which represents second row or second record. This is the third one. Okay, so what that means is that when we are looping through that, remember that this response is this data, and then if you say data result is going to be that means that we are trying to loop through this list. So if the first loop gives us this, it's going to give you this dictionary. Okay, so that means your R is going to be that dictionary which I append to this list, and then the second one also goes, I append, the third one goes, the fourth one goes. Everything is going to be appended, after which I can then come back right here and then convert it to a data frame. Okay, so that means what I'm doing right here is I am converting this JSON, okay, into a data frame. That is what I'm doing right here, and I call it DF. Okay, however, the number of columns in that table is, I think it's about 44 columns or so. I forgot the exact number. I think it's about 44, but I don't want to waste time in because I don't want this project to be too long, right? I just wanted you guys to see how you can integrate different services and what you can do with all these things, right, as an end-to-end data project. Okay, but then what I did was to select few columns: bathrooms, bedrooms, city, home status, home type, living area, price, rent estimate, and zip code. Okay, so now I selected these and I did a DF selected columns. Okay, and what that means is that the data frame I'm going to be getting now will only be for these few columns which I have selected. Okay, that is this transformation I did, and then I will then convert it to CSV. Okay, I'm saying index equals to false. I don't want the index, and then I put that inside the CSV data. Okay, now the next thing now is I need to then upload the CSV into S3. Okay, so I'll say bucket name is the target bucket. Remember that we had already said this is our target bucket right here. So this target bucket right here is what we are assigning to this bucket name. And then remember that we said target file name. So from the file name that we got from the source, which is this object key, like I showed you, that from this object key from beginning to -5, right, or to before -5, which was what I was showing you right here. We want to only have response underscore data underscore this particular time. So we want the file name to be consistent. Okay, the only thing that will then change here is this .csv. So I'm using an f string formatting right here, and then I'm doing our S3 client. I'm doing a dot put object to now put this object key, that's this file right now, inside this bucket, because this bucket is this target bucket right here. Okay, then this is the name, and then what is the data? That's the body, which is this CSV underscore data. You can see that right here, guys, and this is going to return all of this for this status code 200 and all of that. CSV conversion and S3 upload completed successfully. This is what we are going to be getting. I hope you guys are getting this. I know this is a lot, guys, but if things are getting difficult, just pause it, take some break, think about it again, rewind, you know, as the case may be, as many times as you want to, just for you to be able to understand what is going on right here, guys. Okay, now I'm going to deploy. Okay, now that I've deployed, we should be able to run. Okay, so if we run, then what we should be getting is that we should have this extract, we should have this Python connecting to the extract, put it in this landing zone. This will trigger this, it will copy it inside there, and this will trigger another lambda function, which will transform our data into CSV and also select few columns, okay, and then according to our code, and then loads that inside this transformed data. So if we are able to do that, then we can then proceed into, you know, loading it into redshift. Okay, now let us go back to our Airflow and see if we can be able to be successful with this. But before that, let us come right here and refresh. Inside this right here, you can see we have only one data right here, .json. Also our clean data zone CSV bucket, do we have anything? You can see we do not have anything right now. Okay, so now what we can do is let us run this and let us see what is going to be going on. Okay, if we can be successful in this or not. And one more thing, guys, before we run anything right here, I want us to quickly also do something. Okay, now let us also, if you remember, as part of what we have right here, we have an S3 key sensor right here. Let us also create this task, and what this task will do for us is that that task will help us to be monitoring this S3 bucket, if we already have the CSV inside or not. Okay, it's going to be poking inside this because what we want to do is that we want to make sure that that file is inside that bucket before we can trigger S3 to redshift operator. Okay, so you need that sensor to tell you that yes, the file is there and it is complete before you can say, okay, now it's time for us to load into redshift. Okay, now let us add that inside. Okay, now let us do that, guys. Very good. Now what we are going to do for us to do that is this. Let me create that task for us, guys. Let me create that task for us. So what we are going to do is we are going to have what we call S3 key sensor. Okay, S3 key sensor, and then I'll give it a variable name right here. But this S3 key sensor, I need to import it. Okay, now let me import it right here. Let me import it right here. Okay, now that I'm importing it, one other thing that we also need to do is that for us to use this S3 key sensor, because it is from the Amazon provider, you can see airflow.providers.amazon.aws and all of that, right? We need to install Apache Airflow providers Amazon. That's Amazon Apache Airflow provider. Okay, so now before we do that, what I will want to do is to activate our we are going to be activating our environment right here. So if I copy and paste right here, source, you know, end-to-end YouTube _ virtual environment /bin/activate. Let me activate this right here. Now I have activated our virtual environment, and let us now install our Amazon Apache Airflow provider. So I will copy and paste. You can see right here, pip install Apache Airflow provider as Amazon, because that is what will help us to be able to have this S3 key sensor working out for us. So let me run that. You can see that is installing right there. It's going to take few seconds. Okay, it's going to take few seconds, and then after that installation, we can maybe just do a restart of our server, just so we know that everything passed through very well, so that we know that everything is working very well. Okay, so when it is fully installed, we will restart, we will save, and we will restart our server. Okay, so I'll do some explanation and then we'll restart our server. Okay, now this has fully installed. Very good. Now let me do some explanation right here before we then restart our server and continue with other things. Okay, now we have installed Amazon provider, we have imported S3 key sensor, and also we are going to be talking about that right here. If you come right here to this link that I have right here, I think there is a place I have the S3 key sensor. Okay, the AWS sensors S3. You can see this S3 key sensor. I'll provide the link to this for you in the video in the description below, and then you can also go through it to understand what is going on, or what we are doing right here, or why what each of these parameters is doing. As you can see, bucket name, bucket key, bucket name. Okay, now what I'm going to do right here is we are giving it a task ID. Okay, now what is our bucket key? Take note, our bucket key is the file name, because remember that we said that the key sensor, what is going to be checking for us is it wants to be poking inside this transformed data, this transformed bucket, this bucket right here, to know if our file now is residing, if our file has been uploaded inside this bucket. Okay, now we need to give it the bucket name. Now, how do we get the bucket name? So a way to get the bucket name is that, remember that, a way to get the file name rather, a way to get the file name, we want to get the file name, take note. Sorry about that. We want to get the file name. And the way to get the file name is that, remember, the file name was already created in the first task in the Python operator. If you go back to the function of the Python operator, remember that we had this DT string. Remember that we have this output file path, which is .json. But I told you that I also have file string, file_str, which I put as CSV. And I call this response_data_ this time right here, .csv, which is what I was doing right here for you guys. If you remember this transformation, in this transformation right here, which I am getting the name of the file up to before the period, which is this right here. Let me show you again. This name, response_data_ that time, the time at which you ran the Airflow. Okay, then we don't have this .json, but instead we are going to have .csv, and that is what I am doing right here, .csv. So what I'm saying right here is that, this file, remember I put it, this file _str, I put it as part of this list, right, which we are returning here, and we can access this as index 1, and that is exactly what I am doing here, index 1. I'm saying that the bucket key, which is the file name, is going to be task instance.xcom_pool. We want to pull it from this task, from this very first task right here. Okay, whatever is going to return, but the index 1. And the index 1 is this file name that we are talking about right here. And this file name is going to be the file name that is going to be inside these buckets that we want to sense. I hope you are getting it right now. That is the file name for every DAG run we are going to be having. We are going to be having unique file name. Okay, so for each of those unique file name, we want to be sensing that data. Is it in that S3 bucket or not? If it is not in the S3 bucket, don't load in redshift yet. If it is in the S3 bucket, then go ahead to load into redshift. That is what basically we are trying to do here, guys. Okay, now what is the bucket name that we want to load? That we want to be sensing. Okay, so I'm going to put the bucket name right here in my code. Okay, I'll put it right here. You can see. So this define the S3 bucket and file details basically, or you can just say define the S3 bucket. Okay, so now the S3 bucket name is this guy. Remember, this S3 bucket is the one that I just talked about right here, in which we want to sense if that file is there before we load into redshift. Do you understand that, guys, now? Okay, now very good. I hope this is really making a lot of sense right now. And then we are going to have an AWS connection ID. I'll give it this name. We are going to look at that later on. And then I put these settings, and I'm saying that this should time out in 2 minutes. Okay, if it keeps if it keeps trying to poke into that S3 bucket, right, into this S3 bucket, which we said this is the name of the S3 bucket. If we keep poking, okay, and we don't see that file, then after 2 minutes, this is going to time out. Okay, it's going to time out. Okay, and then this poking interval, I'm saying that every 5 seconds, okay, you should be poking into that S3 bucket. Okay, every 5 seconds. Okay, very good, very good. I hope you guys are getting this right now. Okay, now if that is the case, then I can say this is, and then I can add this as the dependency. Okay, and then I can save this right here. I hope you guys are getting this right now. We want to use this S3 key sensor to be checking that S3 bucket. Okay, I hope you guys understand this right now. Now what I want us to do is, because we have done some pip installation right here, I think we should just restart our server just to be on the safer side. Okay, just to be on the safer side, so we don't get an error. So I will just come to my server right here, and I will do a Ctrl+C just to kill it, and then I would restart all over again. So I will do Airflow standalone, and this is going to restart. Okay, now while that is restarting, okay, I can also come right here just to update something, just for the sake of our time. What about if I just make this to be a timeout of, let's say timeout of 60 seconds. So it's going to be poking every 5 seconds. Okay, and then if it doesn't see the file in 1 minute or 60 seconds, then it's going to say it has failed. Okay, so let me save that. Okay, so now that I have saved that, what we then need to do is that you can see this connection right here. You can see this connection, guys. This AWS con ID. We need to create a connection. okay, in our Airflow UI. So I will copy this AWS S3 con name, then I will go to our Airflow. Remember, we have restarted the Airflow, so let me just refresh this because we have restarted. You can see we refreshed, and you can see that the S3 key sensor is right here now. Okay, I hope you guys are getting this. We are not going to run it yet because we need to create a connection, because we need to give Airflow access to our S3. Okay, we need to give it access. So I can just come here and I can say connections. I can say connections, okay, and then I can create a connection ID. I can come right and I'll say AWS S3 con, okay, and then I'll come right here and I'll say Amazon Web Services. I'll click that, and then remember that we had created access key and secret access key previously. If you remember, we downloaded that CSV file. Let's go and open it. This is mine. You should open yours. So remember, I'm going to deactivate this access key after this video. So I'll copy this. I'll paste it right here, and then I'll go back again, copy the secret access key. I'll save it right here, okay, and then I will save. Very good. Remember that it is AWS S3 con. AWS S3 con. Okay, so now AWS S3 con, I will close this right here. I think everything is working fine for us. Then I'll come right here, DAGs. Okay, now one thing I also quickly want to do is that this transformation, this lambda function right here, okay, we have deployed it, but let's quickly do something also right here. Let us click on this runtime settings. Let us click edit. Let us click edit. Okay, I think it's not here. Cancel this. It's not here. Let us go back to let's come right here to, let's come down. Where is that again? Let me see. Let me see. Okay, let's come to configurations. Okay, configurations, and let's come to general configuration. Okay, now this is going to this general configuration is telling us that in 3 seconds, if this lambda function doesn't do what you want it to do, it's going to time out. Sometimes 3 seconds right here might, depending on your data or even where your data is coming from, you might, or for some other reasons, these 3 seconds might be so small. So I can come right here and say edit. Okay, so instead of 3 seconds, I can maybe just put, let's just say 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes is more than enough right here though. So I say 5 minutes, 3 seconds or something. But take note, this timeout here, I think the maximum is 15. Let's see. You see, say the maximum timeout is 15 minutes, so you cannot use more than that. So that means if your code is going to run more than 15 minutes, then you cannot use this. Or maybe instead of that, you have to increase your memory. You have to increase your memory. You can see this, the highest of the memory can go is 10 to 40 megabytes. Okay, so you can increase that. Okay, but for this we don't have to do that. 5 minutes, just put it right there and let us save. Okay, let us do the same thing for the other lambda function that we created, just to be on the safer side. So I'll come right here to configurations. You see that this also is in 3 seconds. I will edit and I will just put 5 right here. Okay, so I will say save. Very good. So I think everything should really be working fine for us right here. We already have our DAG, and I think we already did all the necessary installations. So what we can do is, let us try to run. If we get an error, then we are going to try to debug it. Remember that error is part of development. Okay, we just don't want to have error in production, even though it still happens once in a while. So let's click this and then let's say execute. I can come to graph. I can then click on this thing right here, this box, so that I can see what's going on. You can see this is already successful. This is success. This says it is running. Let us click inside this. Let's see. If I click inside this, I can do logs. I can do logs. You can see what is going right there. It's saying poking for key. It's poking. It's looking for this key. Response underscore data underscore this. It's looking for this key. If it's looking for this key after, and remember that in our code, we said every 5 seconds. If after 60 seconds it doesn't find it, it's going to time out. Okay, so that means something is going on that is making us not to have our file, our .csv file, transform file inside this bucket. Let us refresh this bucket. If I refresh, nothing is there. Let's go and check the previous buckets. This is the very first bucket, end to end. I can see it right here. This is 218. Yes, this is when I triggered it. Okay, because right now my time is 219 and this is 218. Yes, so that means you are able to get this. Let us go to and if you take note, this is 1833. You can see 1833. Let us go to copy of raw. You can see copy of raw 1833, which is what time 218, 41 seconds. You can see that. Okay, and then we should be able to see it in the cleaned data zone, but we are not seeing it. That means there is some problem that is going on. So no wonder that this, you see, this has failed. No wonder that it keeps poking. It keeps poking for this file. Remember that I told you that we converted that file to a .csv, and also we used some selected columns. We are not using all the columns, right? So it was poking for this, but it didn't find it, and hence it did what? It marked this as fail. You can see this is failed. So something is wrong. So maybe the problem is with our lambda function. Remember that when the data get inside this S3 bucket, copy of raw JSON bucket, right? When it got here, it triggers this guy, this transform convert to CSV lambda function. But this is probably where the error is coming from. So let us click this and let us go and debug what the problem is. Remember that we also have access to the CloudWatch, so we can come to monitor and then view CloudWatch. So because we have permissions to write to CloudWatch, so we can check that. So if we come right here, this is the last one, the last log. You can see 21842. If I click this, let's see what is happening. Okay, it says unable import module error, unable to import module lambda function. Oh, you see, it's an error, runtime, import module error, unable to import module lambda function, no module named pandas. You can see no module named pandas. And remember that we were trying to use pandas in our function. Let's go back to our code. Okay, if you look at our code, we said import pandas as PD, right? But then we did not install it, so we should be able to install it. However, in lambda function, there are ways by which you can install dependencies right here. But for pandas, we can AWS has made it easy for us to be able to add layers. You can see, if you see something right here, guys, this is our lambda function. Then we have layers. Our layer right here is only one. We don't have any layer, right? It's 0 rather. Our layers right here is only 0, right? Only 0. We don't have any layer right here. So what we can do is we can come to layers right here and say add a layer. So, and this is where we are going to install our pandas. Runtime, we know is 3.10. Then let us choose the layer. It says layers provided by AWS that are compatible with your function's runtime. Okay, so you can have, you say choose a layer from a list or custom layer. choose a layer from a list of layers created by your AWS account or organization. Or this one says specify an ARN by specify a layer by providing the ARN. Okay, but in the case of this one though, we can just come right here and choose this right here. We can choose this layer. So AWS, I believe, knows that a lot of people would want to use pandas for for data transformations in Python. Okay, and has generously provided us with AWS SDK pandas Python 10 layer. So if I click this and then I can select version, it's only one version we even have. Okay, that makes it better. We don't have to struggle with what version we want. And then I can say add. Okay, so now you can see successfully updated. You can see now that our number of layers has now changed to 1, right? So that means that we have access to pandas that can then run inside our code right here. Okay, now we don't have to do anything. We don't have to do any deploy because we did not change anything in our code. So I think everything should run now if we go back to our Airflow. However, guys, before we proceed, if you are really finding these videos valuable, guys, please go ahead to subscribe if you have not subscribed to our channel. Okay, and click on the bell so that you can be notified whenever we release any of our videos. Okay, as you can see, we've gotten a lot of data engineering projects here that has been going for you guys. So please go ahead and subscribe, and please share with your friends, share with your colleagues, share with your teammates, share with your schoolmates, share on your social media, and share on your LinkedIn so that many more people can benefit from this. As you know, the more people that find this valuable, the more motivated we are going to become, we are going to be able to make more videos for you. Okay, and also don't forget to like these videos. As you know, the more likes we get, the better we are going to be ranked higher by the YouTube algorithm. Okay, all this thing really means a lot to us and also motivate us to do more for you guys. If we know that more people are watching this, more people find it valuable, then we want to do more. And if you have any question or any comment, please put that in the comment section below. Okay, all right, guys, let us get back here. Okay, now we can see that previously we had a fail right here because it kept poking. If I click this and I check logs, it kept poking, but it didn't see. Eventually there is a failure right here. Okay, now we went back to check what the problem was, right? We eventually saw that the first two S3 buckets had the file. However, the last S3 bucket did not have the file. We think that maybe the lambda function did not run. We went to check and realized that it was indeed that we did not install pandas. Okay, and for us to install pandas, luckily AWS has already provided us a layer which we can add, and which we have done that. Now let us go back and run our code. Hopefully it runs this time. Let me go back to this DAGs and click this. Let me go to graph view. Okay, and let me trigger. Fingers crossed, guys, fingers crossed. Go back to graph view, click this box so that we can see the status of everything. Okay, this is successful, this is successful, this says it is running. Let's see what is going on. Let's click inside and look at the logs. Okay, it says poking for key. Okay, let's see. Oh, very good. You see, it said poking for key first time. Okay, and then it didn't see it, and then it poked for key the second time, and then the last time it said, and then it says success criteria met, exiting, marking task for success. Very good, guys. You see, it poked it twice and then it finally found it. Now you see the reason, guys, why we need to have a sensor before we add the redshift operator. because if you add the redshift operator here without the sensor, then that means that you won't have the visibility to the file in your S3. You don't know if it's there or not, and you are then trying to upload into the redshift. You are going to be having errors, okay? And that is why it's good for you. Check your S3 bucket first if you have the file there before you move ahead to load into S3. You can see that this ran successfully. If you are able to get this, congratulations, guys. However, now let us go into our S3 bucket to be able to validate or confirm that we indeed have all those data. Let's go to the first one, end-to-end YouTube. You can see this is, let's refresh. You can see 227. You see this just ran right now, 227. Let us check the next one. The next one is copy of raw. Let us refresh. You can see 227. You can see 227. You can see the time. And then let us go to the last one. That should be a CSV. So let's come right here. You can see right here, guys, 227 as well, 39 seconds. You can see we have that right there. And then our key S3 key sensor was able to sense it that we already have that. Okay, I hope you guys are getting this right now. I hope you are getting this. This is pretty easy, guys. You just have to take some time, take a look at the code, and try to understand. This end-to-end project is a great project for you to get a head start in your data engineering or data science or machine learning journey. You want to build an entire pipeline from beginning to the end. Okay, for the sake of time, we don't want this to be too long. We are going to stop this right now. This is our part 2, and then we are going to also make the part 3 of this series, in which case we are then going to be connecting into our redshift and hopefully quicksight. Okay, so now that we have been able to know how to sense that the data has gotten right here, let us see how we can then load that into Amazon Redshift. Okay, and then on top of that, create a quicksight visualization off of that. Okay, very good, guys. I hope you are enjoying this. Again, guys, if you find this video valuable, I'm really begging you guys, please subscribe to our channel, because we have a lot of things for you, and the only way we can be motivated to make more is when we have more subscribers, and also when we have more likes, because more likes means that a lot of people like our video and we can make more. Also, this will help the YouTube algorithm to rank us higher, okay, so that we can have more viewers, we can have more people liking our video, and also that will make us to make more video for you guys. If you have any question or any comment, put that in the comment section below. Also, all those links that I have shared with you, I'll also put those in the description below, and we will also share the code that we have showed right here with you guys on our GitHub page. Okay, make sure you work on this project from the part 1 to the part 2 and to the part 3 that we are going to be releasing shortly. All right, guys, I'll see you later. Bye. God bless.